Hello and welcome to another game review. Today we'll be looking at Shining Song Starnova, Idle Empire by Love and Space. We'll take a look at what it does right, what it does wrong, and answering the quintessential question, is it worth your money? Shining Song Starnova, Idle Empire, which I'm just going to refer to as Idle Empire from now on, is a non-canon spin-off of the Shining Song Starnova visual novel. It's worth noting that you don't need to have read the visual novel before playing the game. It can help you appreciate the characters a little bit more, but it's far from necessary. Love and Space describes Idle Empire as a business simulator, though I would call it a tycoon game. You play as the producer of the Japanese pop idol group Starnova. Your goal is simple: become the greatest idol group in history by training your idols, sending them on jobs, keeping them happy, building their fame, recording songs, and performances. With that, let's get into the technical bits. Idle Empire is a very low-intensity game with very low minimum and recommended specifications, which are on the screen now. Basically, if you have a computer that was built within the last decade, you should be fine. As for performance, loading times were very short, and I personally encountered 0 crashes and only a handful of stutters and hitches in 28 hours of game time. That being said, there were some people who have reported crashes and difficulties getting the game started up. I didn't personally experience any of this, so I can't verify it, but keep in mind that you may encounter some technical issues. While the performance was perfectly fine for me, the one issue I had with the game on a technical level is that there were quite a lot of bugs. Nothing major or completely game-breaking, but they were noticeable. I'll get into them a little bit more after I've explained some of the gameplay mechanics, but I felt it was important to mention that the game has an above-average level of bugginess. That being said, Love and Space have been releasing frequent bug-fixing patches since its release just over a week ago, so this issue could drastically improve over time. If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you'll know that I always say these things are down to personal preference, and Idle Empire is no different. The art is mostly done in a somewhat cartoony style that's not quite chibi. The important dialogue is done in a more traditional visual novel style, with the art more closely resembling the original visual novel. I personally think that it does its job perfectly well and it has a nice charm to it, but you'll just be able to watch the video and judge for yourself. Much of the music of Idle Empire is reused from the original visual novel. There's some fairly generic sounding background music that plays during your everyday operations. During live performances, a lyricless rendition of the main theme will play. During battles, either your theme or the rival's theme will play, depending on who's ahead, and whenever the idol Nemu's mood gets too low, the eerie, encroaching danger will play, which for the record is hands down my favorite track from the visual novel. The songs that play during the live performances are obviously meant to be the standout. They're fast-paced, upbeat, and generally have that hype kind of feel to them. Obviously, whether or not you like it is going to come down to how much you like J-pop. I'm personally fairly neutral to the genre as a whole. I enjoyed the music enough and it was a good companion to the game, but I don't see myself going out of my way to listen to it. I'll have songs from the soundtrack playing in the background of this whole video, so you can decide for yourself what you think. On to sound and voice. The sound effects in Idle Empire are largely utilitarian. Things like doors opening and closing, the sound of coins when selling something, and little sound effects that play whenever one of your idols completes a job, indicating whether it's succeeded or failed. I don't really have too much to say about them. They are what they are and they do their job. What I do want to talk about is the sound effects that are connected to the UI. In particular, the sounds that play when you change the speed of the game or pause it, and the sound that plays when you receive a notification of any kind. When you speed up or slow down the game, you'll get this little sound that's kind of reminiscent of manually manipulating a vinyl record. While it didn't bother me personally, it's very noticeable and I have seen others complaining about it. I found that since it only happens when you go out of your way to change the game's speed, it's not particularly egregious, though I wouldn't object to a less grating sound effect. That being said, one thing that really does irritate me is this loud buzz that plays whenever the game gives you a notification. It's meant to sound like a phone set to vibrate. It's also really loud and obnoxious. Even then, it wouldn't be so bad if the game didn't give you so many notifications. 25 hours until your next performance? 10 hours until your next performance? An idol's stamina dips a little too low? An idol develops a health condition? A negative personality quirk is activated due to low mood? And the worst of it all is the idol Maria. One of her main downsides is that she starts out with alcoholism, which causes her to drink when her mood is too low, which lowers her stats temporarily. When she drinks, you'll get a notification every single time she does an action until her mood improves. Every single time. Quite frankly, it's fucking annoying and it makes me want to punch my monitor. I know I'm kind of picking on this one specific thing, but I really don't know how this got through the entire dev cycle without anybody realizing that it's really not fun to hear constantly. But that being said, the sound overall is unremarkable. Not bad, not good, it just is. The voice work is something you'll also have to make your own judgments on. Idle Empire uses the same voice actors as the original visual novel. All voiceover work is done in Japanese, and since I don't speak Japanese, it's hard for me to really judge its quality. What I can say is that overall, the voice actors do a good job of sounding constantly animated and lively. Each character has a distinct style of speech, and it sounds like their vocal inflections are deliberately modified to be somewhat of a caricature. I also found that despite not understanding the language, I was generally able to gauge what each voice line was saying based on the tone of voice, which is commendable. The one nitpick I would have is with the character Julie. She's canonically bilingual, having grown up speaking both Japanese and English. Since her voice actress is a native Japanese speaker, her English voice lines naturally have a fairly thick Japanese accent, which doesn't really make sense in universe. It's not immersion breaking, and it's far from unique to Idle Empire. Hell, I've noticed this exact same issue in some of my favorite animes, so that's not saying it's a particularly bad thing. I just thought it was worth mentioning, especially since my impressions of the voice work were otherwise very positive. Now on to the story. I'm usually the type of person who harps on the story for ages, but I'm not going to do that here. And that's because while there is a story mode, there's not all that much of a story. Sure, there is an overarching narrative describing your feud with the rival group Quasar, but it's really just a reason given to you for why you have to do certain things. There are little bits of visual novel-style dialogue that have their charm, but lack any sort of real story drive. There's certainly no developed story arc or anything like that. So if you're coming from the original visual novel looking for a vibrant continuation of that story, you're in for a bit of a disappointment. However, if you're new to the franchise or if you just want to experience the world of Shining Song Starnova a little more, you'll probably be satisfied with what Idle Empire has to offer. Now let's get into the meat of the review, the gameplay. The gameplay of Idle Empire follows a similar pattern to other Tycoon games. You assign tasks to your idols and build up your office and manage your resources. A big part of the game is managing the stats of all your idols. To start off, they have their main stats: Sing, Dance, Persona, and Look. The 4 stats are the main thing that determines how well they perform in live performances, and each of the stats affects other areas of the game as well. There's also Fame, Infamy, Purity, and Popularity. To put it simply, Fame is representative of the positive press the idol receives, while Infamy represents the negative press. Popularity is the sum of both of these. Popularity is the main thing that you're going to want to raise as it directly impacts pretty much every other important thing in the game. Higher popularity means more ticket sales, better song revenue, and more money from jobs. It's also used as a common objective in the story mode and as a measure of scoring in one of the other game modes. Fame is essentially a popularity boost with no downsides, while Infamy makes an idol more likely to get hit by scandals, which really suck. Purity is an interesting stat. It's basically a measure of how much the public views the idol as a good girl. A low purity results in an infamy boost as well as an increased likelihood of scandals, so keeping it high should be a priority. Most of your idol's time will be spent training in the various rooms to improve their stats. Doing just about anything will drain their HP. If HP gets too low, they get penalties to their movement speed, activity speed, and mood. You can restore HP by sending them to the break room like you would any other training room. The main ways to make money in the game, at least until later on, are jobs, songs, and lives. Businessmen will periodically enter the office and negotiate a job offer for you. There are benefits and risks to every job, and for the most part, if you succeed, you get the benefits, and if you fail, you get the risks. You get the money whether you succeed or fail. Most jobs will also provide a fame boost if successful and an infamy boost if failed, and some can positively or negatively affect purity. Songs are pretty straightforward. You select your singers, choose whether or not to record a video, and send them off to record their song one by one. Once it's recorded, the rest is all done automatically, and you'll be making that money in no time. Live performances are the interesting bit. They provide a nice boost to your cash flow and the entire group's popularity. You pay an upfront cost to book a show in 50 hours. You have to meet a minimum amount of ticket sales or the show is cancelled, with sales being determined by overall popularity. At the performance itself, you choose your set list when the girls will automatically perform the songs. These little bubbles corresponding to the 4 main stats will come flying at the stage, and the stat levels of all the girls will determine how fast they can fire out bullets to stop them. If the bubbles are popped, they go away and generate hype, which determines the overall quality of the show. If they hit the stage, one or more girls will be temporarily stunned and lose some health. If you can get your hype close to max, the audience will start to break glow sticks, which will provide some additional cash. You also have the option of using special effects to pop some bubbles in an area of effect. The costs increase with each use and it doesn't generate hype, but it's useful for keeping your idols from getting overwhelmed. Another big factor is managing your idol's mood. The most consistent way to do this is to manage their pay. As their popularity goes up and the others get paid more, each idol will expect more money from you. The amount you pay them compared to their expectations will give a mood modifier, with good pay raising mood and bad pay lowering it. You can also raise or lower mood by sending them on jobs they like or dislike respectively. Mood will also go down when bad things happen, such as getting overworked. When mood is either good or great, the idol will charge her Nova bar, and when it's full she can use her ultimate ability, which will fully restore HP and have an additional effect. These effects range from absolutely useless to god tier. For example, Natsuki's ultimate ability drastically improves her movement speed for a short time, which is pretty much worthless since she'll be spending most of her time standing still in training. But then there's Aki's ultimate ability, which makes her train several times faster for a short time. When mood is low, the girls will be more susceptible to developing negative conditions, such as injuries which lower the dance stat, or depression which slows movement speed and work speed. Conditions cost time and money to cure, so it's worth minimizing them. Some idols also have built-in conditions that activate when mood is too low. My favorite example is Nemu because she'll pull out her knife and go full-on yandere when she gets angry. She'll stop doing anything useful and will interrupt the actions of any nearby idols until she snaps out of it. Basically, keep mood high. There are also two main negative events that can happen, and these are typically determined by your idol's total infamy, the ratio of infamy to fame, and their purity. The first is scandals, which I mentioned previously. At the start of the game, when a scandal happens, you'll have to choose between a pretty big purity hit with a mild fame and mood penalty, or a small purity hit with a big penalty to fame, a big boost to infamy, and a big hit to mood. Later on, you can hire a lawyer to make these go away at a pretty steep cost. It's 100% worth it in the late game to pay this cost every time, but it's very annoying. You can also be the target of hate campaigns, sometimes known as fanquakes. You can never really completely avoid them, but you can reduce their frequency by keeping fame and purity high. Hate campaigns will interrupt every idol who's not currently out on a job, will drain the HP of those idols, and will randomly destroy furniture in your office, which will have to be replaced. As you can imagine, they kinda suck. These are both very good incentives to keep your girls loved by the public. So there's a lot more to the game than just that, but I wanted you to understand the base game mechanics so I can talk about it a little further. The biggest thing I've grown to enjoy about Idol Empires is the level of control you have over how much micromanaging you want to do. If you want, you're fully capable of sending each girl to do each action manually, and you have the ability to queue up multiple actions in a row. Alternatively, you can click on the stat icons in each idol's stat page to make it so if they're not doing anything, they'll train one of the selected stats on their own. However, by design, each girl will do things a little bit differently, and they can all be somewhat inefficient. For example, Aki will sometimes overtrain to the point where she becomes overworked, which fits in with her character, so you'll have to be attentive and sometimes manually schedule a break. In addition to this autopilot mode, there's the Master Scheduler, which will automatically queue up a specific action for a specific idol at a specific time of the week. I found that my happy medium was allowing the girls to train, sing, and dance and to take breaks on their own. I would then use the scheduler to send them all to the Persona Coach and to the cafeteria at set times. And of course, I'd still have to manually send them out on jobs and to record songs, as well as fixing any mistakes they made in their self-scheduling. Of course, if you're more meticulous than me, you don't have to do any of that. Or if you have a more organized mind than me, you can use the scheduler to pretty much automate everything, assuming you can properly manage their HP. I don't see a lot of people giving the system the praise it deserves, and I seriously found that it made my experience much more satisfying, and even with the level of automation that I had going on, there was still plenty for me to do manually. Like many other tycoon games, there's a bit of a learning curve as you slowly figure out what it is the game intends for you to do. So at the start, I was having a bit of difficulty, particularly when it comes to mood management. The game wasn't very upfront with all its info, so at the start, I assumed that when a girl likes or dislikes a job, it affects success chance, when in actuality, it just gives a mood modifier, which is very useful if you know about it. However, once I did kind of figure out how everything worked, I found it fairly easy to get into a solid routine where I was never really in much trouble. In fact, once I unlocked the late game event room, which basically just prints money, I'm on the path to gain money much faster than I can spend it. The main failure state is when you lose too much money. You start out with 2 stocks, but you can have a maximum of 4. If you ever get a debt of 5,000 or more, a stock is automatically sold, and if you lose all your stocks, it's game over. Of course, you can buy them back at any time if you have the money. Some stages of story mode will have additional failure states, and one of the other game modes also has an additional fail state, but I'll get into that a bit later. It's an effective system, though once I got to the point where I had an event room and could send idols on high-end jobs regularly, this ceased to be any kind of concern whatsoever. It was actually a little bit too easy at times. One nice little thing the game does is it lets you choose one of the girls as your center, or the focal point of the group. Each girl has a center ability that gets leveled up as you play with that girl as your center. These levels persist throughout all playthroughs, so there is a sense of permanent progression there. These center abilities are all pretty useful, though I do like some more than others. For example, Aki's center ability makes your idols train faster, while Julie's center ability reduces the cost of makeup, and Nemu's ability will passively generate income. I think it's ultimately going to come down to personal preference, but it's a nice little bonus feature and it gives you something to work on during your playtime. I also like that how since there are achievements tied to maxing out each girl's center ability, you're encouraged to give each girl some time to see if you like them. But now I do have to talk about the bugs I mentioned earlier. There's nothing too game-breaking, but these bugs are frequent enough that even after several post-release bug fix patches, I have to wonder what level of QA actually went into the game. A few examples. When you click on any buttons in the UI, you'll also click through them and select anything that was underneath them. If you put a microphone too close to the edge of the recording room, any girl using it will clip through the wall, and if that wall happens to connect to another room, she'll think she's in that room, interrupt her recording to walk out and walk back into the recording room, only to do it all over again. If you have multiple researchers and one of their lab stations gets destroyed in a hate campaign, forcing him to leave, it doesn't matter if you replace it, he won't come back. It's little bugs like this that I see all the time. No, none of them completely ruin the experience, and most of them can be worked around, but it does make the game come off as really sloppy. I can only hope that Love and Space takes the time to properly clean up the game, though from what I've seen of them in their past work, they do actually care about their work, so I'm optimistic. I think a lot of this was born out of inexperience rather than laziness. Another thing I'll nitpick is that the control scheme isn't perfect and there aren't enough hotkeys for my liking. Again, I'll chalk this up to inexperience, as Idle Empire is Love and Space's first venture into the tycoon genre, but for the life of me, I don't see why they decided that in a game where you mostly use the mouse, the camera controls are on the arrow keys and not WASD. I don't know why the controls can't be rebound. I don't know why you can't select your idols with the number keys and immediately send them to a training room with a button press. And I don't know why you can't zoom out far enough to actually see everything in your office. It all comes off as very amateur, and while it didn't ruin the game for me, I'm very aware of how much better it could have been. One feature I do have to praise is the unlockables. Basically, each of these items which you can place in your office must be unlocked by doing a certain thing. For example, there's one for maxing out Julie's purity when she's your center. There's also one for getting a ton of sales on a single song. These items will provide insanely useful passive effects when purchased and placed in your office. For example, the Sunrider model will make it so hate campaigns no longer destroy furniture, and character posters provide passive stat boosts to their related idol. These items are also very efficient ways of boosting your decor stat, which makes it more likely that you'll receive high quality jobs. Once unlocked, these items will be available in all future playthroughs. It's nice to constantly have goals to work towards, and the rewards are just so very worth it. I'm also a bit of a completionist, so this feature is probably what'll keep me playing. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the different game modes. Free play mode is basically the sandbox mode where you just play away without any objectives other than to not lose all your money. Story mode gives you a variety of preset scenarios. The early stages are designed to teach you the game's mechanics, so I'd highly recommend starting the game with story mode. The later stages test your versatility by throwing different modifiers and fail states at you. For example, there's one stage where you're being extorted by the Yakuza and have to pay increasing amounts every day for a set period of time. And there's one stage where all negative things will be more frequent until you fulfill the win condition. They also give you a lot of different map layouts to work with, so in many stages space management becomes very important, especially if they don't allow you to destroy the walls. Overall, I found story mode to be fun and engaging, though I don't really see myself going back and replaying it. Next up is Quasar Battle. In the story mode, you'll be introduced to a system called idol battles. They function much like a regular live performance, except that in addition to your hype bar, there's also one for your rivals, Quasar. At certain points in the performance, some of the bubbles will be replaced with glowing Quasar bubbles which decrease Quasar's hype if popped. If you lose an idol battle, it's game over. In Quasar Battle mode, you can no longer set your own live performances. Instead, all time will be spent preparing for the next idol battle, and these ramp up in difficulty with each one. It's a pretty fun game mode, though I found that it has the same issue of being too easy at times as free play. Basically, once you get into a really comfortable financial spot and all your idols have high stats, it becomes really easy to just record a bunch of high quality songs and have them easily perform them all with minimal stage effects. I also kinda missed having the ability to set different live performances because that was one of the metrics I personally used to gauge how well I'm doing. If I could have a sellout live show end really well, I'd feel good about myself and my progress, whereas I didn't get that same feeling from idol battles. It was still a fun game mode, and I think most of my issues with it come down to personal preference. And lastly, there's my personal favorite, Generations mode. This is a true endless mode designed to really test your long-term management skills. The way this game mode works is that each idol has a starting age, and when they're under 18, they'll passively gain purity. When they're older, they passively lose it, with this rate increasing as they age. Some of the girls are aged below their canon age for gameplay purposes. For example, Aki is canonically 18, but in Generations she starts at 14. When the negatives start to outweigh the positives, you have the option of retiring that idol, but this will basically reset her. Her stats, age, and purity will all go back to their default values, but her fame will remain the same and the infamy will be set back to 0. So your goal is to manage all this and try to figure out when it's worth sacrificing the stats of your idol to clear out the negatives of their purity debuffs. It's a lot of fun and it adds another layer of complexity to the game, and since popularity will continue to increase no matter what, even as you're retiring idols, the game never feels like it takes a step back. And amusingly, there's an alternative scoring system this game mode uses. The youngest idol you can recruit is Mako, and the game will measure how many generations of Mako you have, so that's kinda funny. But yeah, for the player who's pretty much got the game figured out, Generations mode is a great way to keep yourself engaged, and I really enjoy it. So in conclusion, what do I think? Well, the game is a lot of fun, but it has its issues at the current time. I find the progression system incredibly satisfying, and honestly, the time kinda slips away when I'm playing the game. Unfortunately, the big things holding it back are the numerous bugs and the design issues with the UI. Fortunately, Love and Space have been releasing small patches addressing some of these issues, but for now, they're still there. But overall, I really enjoyed the game and I'm gonna continue playing it. Those of you who've watched any of my previous reviews will know that I hate traditional review scores. I feel like they're pretty much useless and don't tell the full story. So I'm going to ask and answer the only question you have in mind when going through these reviews. Is Shining Song Starnova Idle Empire worth your money? Idle Empire is available on Steam for $14.99 US or your regional equivalent. I'd say at that modest price point, it is definitely worth your money. $15 is definitely a good budget price, especially since most small studio games tend to release for around $30. The issues I mentioned earlier are definitely offset by the low price point, and that may not even be a factor assuming the bug fixes come through. If you're the type to enjoy tycoon games, then I'm sure Idle Empire is a worthwhile choice for you. Hell, I already have almost 30 hours in game, and I'm going to continue with it and probably even 100% it at some point. That alone should be a pretty ringing endorsement. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, please consider leaving a like or a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter at AdsTweets for updates and memes, and to follow me on Twitch at AdsGames. And be sure to let me know what you thought of the game if you pick it up for yourself. Well, with all that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next Monday.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back.